Okay. Hi, everybody. So we are so excited to be on with you. Finally, Frontlines is here. The moment we've been waiting for. So I have all of these wonderful experts here to share with you all this wonderful knowledge they have in this flu and COVID season. I'm Deborah Dixon Anderson, and I am with Light of Gold PR and Gold Wellness Circle. And so we have Josh Hartman. He's our only guy on this call. So our only guy expert, guy power. That's okay. And then we got Jennifer, our wonderful scientist that we have with us weighing in. You got to wave it out, Jennifer.
Everybody, Jennifer Payne Parrish.
Yes, Jennifer Payne Parrish. Then we have Irene Treadwell, who is our wonderful nurse that we have also with all her fantastic background. So I will go into a tiny bit about their backgrounds for you, and then we're going to get started. And if you have any questions, I'm going to try to check it out on Facebook and try to ask some of these questions for you to our fabulous experts. So let me go ahead and pull up my Facebook page right now. That way I don't have to switch screens and I can watch. And Samir. And we have our tech support with Samir right here from my team. Good job, Samir. We've been doing this for a couple of hours. It's been quite a day for us, I got to tell you. So let's see. So you let me know. Let's see when it's live. I don't see it on my page though.
I see it. It shows, I see live, record live.
There it is. Now I see it. Okay, I got it. And then you did 2 shares already up. I see people jumping on. Okay, so you did a couple of shares already, Samir?
Yes.
Okay, I got it. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn this sound down so it doesn't come up. So I could just watch the questions come up. So welcome everybody, and thank you to our wonderful experts. And Samir, thank you so much for your help. You've been working on this pretty much all day today for weeks with our team. So thank you, and the rest of Team Gold, who's been working so prolifically on this. So this is now flu season. Josh Hartman and I actually did the first Frontlines months ago. That was part 1. And I still remember, Josh, we talked about this. We said, okay, things might change in the fall. And then I mentioned to you, maybe we should do another one in the fall. And here we are. Here we are. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And I'm going to introduce all of our wonderful speakers. I'm looking at the press release that we have. I'm not going to go into their all the way into their bios, but we have Jennifer Payne Parrish, who has a PhD in pathology. She's been a leader in the pharmaceutical industry for 22 years. And look how good you look. I would never have thought that.
Oh, well, thank you.
All those years.
I'll take that.
You take that, right? Okay, great. And then we have Josh Hartman. He's our fantastic EMT paramedic tour chief, having worked with Inglewood Hospital Medical Center, Senior VP, Public Safety, Cardiovascular Division for HMP Global. What haven't you done, Josh? Oh my gosh.
There's a lot still to be done. But,
and it's still a lot to be done. Still a lot to be done. And then we have our wonderful Irene Treadwell, LPN, behavioral health nurse, founder of TMI for Your Health and the Black Nurses Consortium. Thank you so much for joining us also, Irene.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's good to have all 3 of you here. And thank you so much. Really appreciate you working with us all these months and putting this event together. And it's very, very important. And so what we'll do a quick share of some slides, and then I will segue into some questions we'll start with Josh, because Josh has to roll off a little bit sooner than everybody else. And so we'll start with Josh and asking him some questions. So I will make sure, let me get this slide up. Part 2. And so just share with you. 1 second, everybody. All right. So just a little bit about the Go Wellness Circles, a platform that we really developed in response to COVID, promoting the importance of physical and mental health amongst our communities and in our world today. We provide resources, workshops like this. We do Zumba classes, yoga classes. We have a lot of great stuff going on. So definitely visit gowellnesscircle.com. We felt it was important to do this topic that can help a lot of people. And that's what we typically try to do, is come up with some interesting, engaging topics that would serve the community. And we want to make sure we keep, help keep you and your loved ones engaged in a community and staying safe and healthy and practicing a healthy lifestyle. So as we go down to this slide, I think I got this stat from you, Josh, about the fear of the virus has kept the sick and injured from calling 911. So some patients may be delaying emergency care during the pandemic. That statistic just really floored me. Emergency department visits declining 42%. I mean, talk to us about that. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very accurate. And so we had a huge influx of patients going to the emergency department early on in the pandemic.
Wow, that's amazing. So early on, would you say that statistic is still true, or it's changing, increasing, declining?
I think what we've seen is that after that huge influx of patients, specifically in the Northeast and where I work in New York and New Jersey, we had all sorts of people coming into the emergency department with COVID-related problems. Then there was a huge marketing campaign to say, okay, unless you're really, really sick, stay at home. Don't come to the emergency department. We're overwhelmed. We have all these COVID patients. Don't come to the emergency room unless you're really, really, really sick. Well, that did a good job in keeping people from coming to the emergency room, almost what I would say too good of a job. And those people that really did need to go to the emergency room did not go. And so now you have people getting sicker and sicker and not seeking the attention that they needed because they were in fear of going to the ER. And honestly, they were just following directions. They were told not to come to the ER unless it was life-threatening. And I don't think all patients really understand whether something is life-threatening or not. So that posed a challenge. After the hump, though, you get into like the May and June dates. We moved all the COVID patients through. Unfortunately, we did have a tremendous number of fatalities. We also had a lot of people moved upstairs, and a lot of good news. A lot of people survived, and a lot of people had tubes taken out of their throats and were able to go live their lives and become healthy again. But what happened is that the people who were ill continued to fear coming to the emergency department for fear of catching COVID from the next bed over. And although the emergency departments then went on a campaign to try and get everyone to come to the hospital, if you have chest pain, if you're having shortness of breath, come to the hospital, don't delay getting care. The word had already been out, plus all the PR around how susceptible people are, especially those with risk factors to acquiring COVID-19. And so at that point, hospitals were begging to get ER patients and begging patients who are ill and injured to come to the emergency department, trying to prove how safe they were to everybody, both COVID and non-COVID patients. So yeah, that statistic is absolutely accurate. And I would just say the PSA here is if you are sick, if you are injured, if you are ill and you need help, get the help, whether that help is in an emergency room, find an urgent care, find your private physician. But if you need help, don't delay.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's amazing. I'm still reeling from that statistic. It's pretty amazing. So let's see. I will go back to changing my view. back to gallery view. So I'm just going to go back to sharing that other slide that came after that. So we talked about the emergency room statistic. Thanks for weighing in on that, Josh. And then we'll share a little bit about this with, and Jennifer is going to weigh in on the African Americans continuing to get infected and die from COVID-19 at rates more than 1.5 times their share of the population, which is a pretty huge statistic. And so, Jennifer, just quickly, if you could weigh in from your perspective as a scientist on what this means from, the scientific perspective with vaccines and everything like that.
Yeah, so, and thanks for the question. I recently wrote a paper on this, just about the challenge from an African-American perspective regarding the
Oh, you're breaking up a little bit.
and COVID-19. It's basically focusing on the historical context of the Tuskegee experiment and the impact that had on our community. Right? So a lot of my friends were calling me and family members were saying, I'm not getting the vaccine. Are you going to get it? And initially my response was, yeah, sure, I'll get the vaccine, But then I did start to do some research about what was the development pathway of the vaccine. And that a vaccine that is developed in a program called Warp Speed may be concerning to some people. When they started to ask for more African-American participation, my concern was, well, first you have to talk about the historical context of why African-Americans have some hesitation about participating in clinical trials. You have to have that discussion where you just ask Black people to participate in a clinical study. But we do need the data. We do need to understand, especially because African-Americans have high rates of high blood pressure, renal disease, cardiovascular disease. We need to understand how the vaccine functions and works in people who have these types of comorbid conditions. And so while we do need to enroll African Americans, because many of us do have these comorbid conditions, we also need to first have the dialogue about what are the safety parameters that protect people like African Americans in clinical trials. There's the IRB, which approves any study. It is a separate body. So it's separate from the FDA. It's separate from the CDC. So any study that happens in the community has to be approved by an IRB. There's informed consent, which means you must understand the study, the protocol, and what it entails. And you have to sign it to say, I understand the risk. So there are certain parameters that have been put in place because of Tuskegee that will help to protect people, and African Americans are included in that. But we have to have a dialogue first, and that was part of my my real, I guess, bringing me to the forefront of this with my family and friends to just understand a little bit more their reluctance.
Deborah, you're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me? Good, okay, sorry about that. Thank you, Jennifer, for weighing in from your perspective. I appreciate that. So now I'm going to ask Irene to weigh in from what she's seen from her perspective as a nurse. And then after we get your way in, Irene, we'll switch back to Josh. So what do you think, also from your perspective as a nurse, what have you seen in the hospitals or, where you've been helping patients?
Well, actually, I'm a behavioral health nurse outpatient setting. I've been fortunate enough to work with the homeless, people with mental health disorders, and people with substance use disorders. And I currently work in an outpatient treatment program clinic, or what is otherwise known as a methadone clinic in New York City. So the needs of the particular clients there are a chronic, meaning that they have co-occurring disorders such as substance use, and as well as high blood pressure, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, renal failure. And I think the one thing I have seen on the front lines, including being a COVID-19 survivor myself, because I contracted the virus in March, and I was able to stay home and convalesce as opposed to going into the hospital. I think the most important thing we need to remember, in the beginning, we didn't know much about the particular virus. And then as it advanced so rapidly, our hospitals were overwhelmed, both as far as the lack of resources, physically, as far as PPE, which is personal protection equipment. The other resources, human lives. Like we had nurses working 12, 16 hours, almost 7 days a week. You are literally going to burn out trying to save people's lives. So, and again, like Josh said, in the beginning, it was, okay, if you don't feel well, you can go to the emergency room. Then once all the hospitals and the healthcare systems became overwhelmed, it was, listen, unless it's a critical situation, do not go to the emergency room first. Seek out assistance from your healthcare provider, or call the ED first, or go to urgent care. And then it just sort of, which was a good thing, because sometimes some people use the emergency room as their PCP, but it kind of snowballed in the opposite direction. By the time some people actually came into the ED, they were in dire straits. So the question was, if I go into the hospital, am I going to catch it? That was the thing. If I go into the hospital, am I going to catch it? I've had patients come in sick as a dog, that we were like, maybe you really should go to at least the emergency room, get a triage. They were like, I'm not going in there, because what happens if I don't come out the same way I went in because of the virus, or what they used to call it, the Rona. So you really have to work through what are the ways that we can better utilize the resources we have, which includes education, because it's a constant educating the public and fellow staff members. This is what the virus is. This is how you contract it. This is the best way it should be treated that we know of thus far. Our treatment plans are ever changing, they're evolving. So we're literally going, day by day. So as far as being on the front lines, going to work every day, which I still do. Most people think on a clinic or outpatient basis, we're closed. We're open. We are sometimes our patients' only lifeline to people, because if all of my clients are on isolation basis, the only time they come out is when they come to get medicated.
Wow.
So
Wow.
it's just something to be mindful of, how it affects your mind, body, and soul. But more importantly, to our fellow nurses, and some who contracted disease while on the job, and unfortunately, they didn't make it.
Wow. Wow. Thanks for sharing that, Irene. Wow, that's
You're
amazing.
welcome.
And you're a COVID survivor yourself. That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah. And even with that, like Josh said, we were inundated with data as far as what to expect, what not to expect. When I actually contracted it, I did not display the so-called signs and symptoms that were posted by the CDC. So the only reason why I went to the doctor is because of my past history of having a severe case of pneumonia. And that was the reason for, maybe you need to come in and get evaluated. And while you're here, we can just, give you the test and see what happens. So other than that, I probably would have stayed home that whole 2 weeks. I really feel like I'm run over. And I didn't have a fever and only had body aches one time. I never had shortness of breath. I didn't have any of those so-called designated symptoms at that time. Now, the parameters as far as signs and symptoms have expanded. So everybody's different. But I mean, This is a learning, a living case study, so to speak, learning experience for us all.
It is. Absolutely. Thanks, Irene. I appreciate
You're welcome.
you sharing that. Josh, you let me know. Can I shoot a question at you?
Absolutely, go for it.
Okay. All right. Sure will. So tell us what it's like now, when you're, do you see a noticeable, like back in March, it was just like crazy, even April. So, I mean, when you're doing your thing, are you seeing a difference in the hospitals, when you're getting those calls and everything? Is it like a much less busier atmosphere now, a little bit more mellow, or is it still like hyper busy? I can't
So-
imagine that it would be because the cases have reduced, right?
Yeah, the number of cases has significantly reduced, and therefore the number of calls that we get and the number of ER admissions and ER visits from COVID-19 perspective or COVID-19 positive patients has significantly declined. To Irene's point, though, what has not mellowed out is the hypervigilance that the healthcare provider still has. And that's whether you've contracted COVID already or whether you have not contracted COVID. We're now wearing PPE or personal protective equipment that we were wearing in March. And so although we're not seeing the same number of patients, because we all know the virus is out there, and now, again, to Irene's point, is that there are people out there who have zero symptoms, zero, and probably will never have any symptoms at all, but they can transmit the virus. And so for someone who is working as a paramedic, as a nurse, as a doctor, as whatever, patient care, we still have to be hyper vigilant about ourselves to protect ourselves and our families and everybody else and our next patient. So we're still wearing very elaborate, I would say, personal protective equipment, despite the fact that the call volume has decreased.
Okay. So I know this is a loaded question, but how do you feel about, like, have you seen even an increase because of the reopening of the schools? Have you seen anything change?
Well, I don't think we can attribute it directly to the opening of schools, although you can look at the research that's coming out now about colleges. So if you're speaking about colleges, that seems to be different. But I don't want to generalize about schools because I think various communities have taken on the school responsibility differently. And I think there is no right decision. So whatever's best for the particular community, whether it's a public school, private school, inner city, everybody's got to make the best decision for their students, and everybody is in a different situation. I would say that we could chalk it up to a whole bunch of things, but there is absolutely an increase in the number of cases that we're seeing. At this point, they're not the type of dire cases that we had seen early in March, but unfortunately, it could be a prelude to that. We hope not, because we hope that people will remain vigilant about their 6 feet of separation, wearing a mask in public, washing hands frequently, right? We hope that people do all those public safety and public health things to assure that we don't go back into crisis mode where we have such high acuity patients, but certainly just the number of positives that are coming back now compared to, the August and September and July even, definitely higher.
Okay. All right. So what about, what's the biggest difference that you've noticed even in the patient cases? Are they still, the COVID cases that are coming in, are they still as severe upon arrival as they were before, or are they less severe now?
The vast majority of them are much less. I think it goes back to the fact that the ERs are more open now. There's more care that can be given more quickly. People are coming back to the emergency departments to seek help if they have some of the more typical signs and symptoms, such as trouble breathing and coughing. So we're not seeing the high acuity cases. Hopefully we're getting to these people earlier and following up with them. Doesn't mean they necessarily need to be admitted to the ER, but that they're getting care and being given. We now know there are multiple regimens that people should be on. We learned a lot. I think Irene mentioned it as well, is that this is a novel virus. Novel meaning we haven't seen it before. And so just like we haven't seen the virus before, we didn't know how to treat the patients. And so early on, we were, for example, anybody who had oxygen saturation in the 80s, which is not good, we would be putting tubes down their throat to help them breathe. And we learned over the first several weeks that that's not helping these patients, and they're better off as long as other parameters are within normal limits or close to normal limits, to let them breathe on their own and just supplement oxygen. So it's just an example of things that we've learned to try and reduce the acuity of some of these cases.
Okay, wow, that's good stuff. Um, who do you think is now more at risk for COVID?
So the only people I think that have an increased risk compared to in March, we just didn't know it in March, is probably going back to the communal living. So the schools, colleges, these are people who may have been at home during the summer or been at home because their colleges put them on Zoom Academy for the semester. So now that they're back in school and living communally, and we know that teenagers don't always necessarily make the best decisions, there is an uptick in that type of community. But I don't think anyone should be mistaken that the variability, so the potential to get the virus hasn't changed. That didn't change and has not changed. We don't have a vaccine for this virus, so we are doing what we can to mitigate it by these public health items that I mentioned before. But really, who's most at risk? Whoever's not doing those things. Whoever has decided to take upon themselves to go to places with large gatherings, to not wear a mask when they do so, to not stay outside of 6 feet, and not washing their hands. Those are the people most at risk. Now, that's of course the caveat is that you have the folks who are always more at risk that have comorbidities. So those people remain as much at risk as they did previously.
Okay. So let me see. So this is where we've kind of had to redesign how we're going to do this with all of our panelists. And I know that Josh has to roll off soon. So what I want to do is you let me know how much time we have, Josh, because these are going to be questions that will be a little bit for everybody. And you let me know.
Yeah, I'm going to roll off in a few minutes, but keep going and I'll stand as long as I can, and then I'll gracefully just wave goodbye and let these professional ladies who have much more credentials than I do take it from here.
No, all of you are very credentialed. So I'm just excited to have all of you here. So this is going to be some questions that any one of you can answer. This has been a general question that I've kind of asked by poll who would be interested in this particular question. And it is, what do you think about the rise in cases in states that initially brushed off the threat of the pandemic? We don't want to get, political, obviously, but what do you think those states could be doing to fight the COVID spread that they are currently not doing now? Would you say it's the masks, the gloves, the social distancing for the most part? So anybody wants to take a stab at that?
I would say, first and foremost, education. And we have to lead by example. So that even if that means the particular governing body for the state would have to lead by example, then yes, it's important to find the particular clusters, or I call them the micro clusters within your macro cluster, meaning, you have extra pockets that are exacerbated with higher rates of positive people. You need to address those first and work your way down. Of course, PPE is important, hand washing is important, and actually go and ask the particular providers who are hands-on in the trenches, what is working, what is not working, and how can we put this back on? Again, contact tracing is like the key. You have to find patient zero and work your way back. But at the end of the day, you have to remind people it is not, like I tell some of the people, it's not that bad to have, I call it the cooties, because they say, why you call it the cooties? And I say, well, my cooties and your cooties are totally different, but this is a different type of cooties that nobody wants. So how can we not share these particular cooties? And there's nothing wrong if you contract the virus. I think there's a big stigma about contracting COVID-19. Nobody wants to be in isolation. I think the nation, if not the world as a whole, is suffering from quarantine fatigue, which can lead to apathy. and therefore you might have upticks because people tend to let their guard down. I mean, we've been locked up since what? March. Summer is gone. I mean, people have cabin fever. So how can we address that? And then most importantly, people are not working because some people were fortunate enough to do remote work and some people are frontline workers. So if they don't get out the house to work, they just don't have any money. The access to healthcare, it should be, even though we're in America where your healthcare is contingent upon either your unemployment, what you get from the state, it should be a blanket right about now that we are just gonna swallow hard, take this loss, but we have to make sure every person in our particular county or parish or town or borough, that they have adequate access to healthcare and medication. And compassion. I think if we have some of those key areas covered, you would be surprised at the amount of compliance that you would like to see. And then we lead by example. You know, one state does real well, the other states look over and say, what did you do? And how can we apply that to our state? And so on and so on and so on. So right about now, a lot of infighting between particular professions, et cetera, it is hindering the process.
Yeah, I would agree completely. It's all about education. So I'd say the top three are education. And then number four is set an example. You have to set an example. You cannot expect that someone is going to follow if you don't walk the walk. You can't just talk the talk. And so whether that's a teacher, or whether that's your boss, whatever the environment that you're in, you got to set an example because you know, we've set pretty clear understanding that these public health mitigation factors work, but they only work if you actually follow through.
And I think that I want to speak to the issue of herd immunity, because I think one of the misunderstandings is that herd immunity will get us to a safer place quicker. Just expose everybody and everybody will get the virus and they'll recover, because we know about 80% I think recover. And so let's do it that way. And I don't know if that's the mindset of some of these areas that are seeing these kind of increases in the number of cases. But the challenge with this virus, and Irene is right, everyone who gets it has a different experience with the virus. The symptoms are different, etc. But it's novel, meaning we don't know a lot about it. We're learning. We're only 6 or 8 months in. It is not like the flu, which is a different type of virus. And although it's a respiratory virus, they're similar in that way. The impact to the body is much different. And so what we know about this virus is that for some who have maybe mild symptoms, or maybe they have extreme symptoms, but they recover, the impact to the cardiovascular system is severe. For some, there is renal damage. So we are learning about this virus as we go, and there is no real reason to expose yourself to the virus to try to get it over with, because one, your overall disease could be very different than someone else, and you could have long-lasting effects. And remember, there are 20% that go on to have severe disease, and of that, 5% will die from the disease. So you don't know if you're going to be in that 80% who recovers, or that 20% who has to go into the hospital on a ventilator and potentially not recover. And so I think herd immunity is a misunderstood concept, and it, in this case, is not an effective way of eradicating the virus. It is an effective way of infecting people and increasing the number of people who can become severely ill.
So, but the question was about the flu season and flu shots and COVID-19. I know this is kind of was months in the making, this whole question that I had back in April. What does everybody think about, getting the flu shot and COVID?
Well, I got mine. I mean, I contract out to do pop-up flu clinics anyway. So the need is there. Technically speaking, I tell people, if you live by yourselves, you're your own man or woman, you have your own island, you're never going to interact with people. If you don't want to get the flu shot, that's fine. But no man is an island, which means you're going to interact with people. And if you have loved ones, and especially loved ones that have some type of co-occurring medical conditions, stop sometimes thinking about yourself and thinking about them. They might be more susceptible to the virus, and therefore, if you were to get the flu, you might be out for maybe like a week or two. If they get the flu, they end up going into the hospital. It's something you should think about. I don't think people realize the flu can run like a pandemic, just like we're going through now with COVID-19. So that's something to be said. Same thing when people ask, should I get my pneumococcal vaccine, my shingles? We see in trials for the COVID-19 vaccine, wait till there's one that's officially out. The trials are finished. They've got the results, because apparently some of the trials started, then they had to stop because there were reactions. And typically speaking on trials, Jennifer, you could probably help me with this one. If you do experience a reaction in the trials, you really have to stop, take care of that particular person, the person of the group, and then reevaluate what went well, what didn't went well. Let's go back, to the table again. So I always say preference is your own personal walk in life. But if you are living with someone in your home, or you have small children, we're in school season. All it takes is one wipe across the nose with some of our children, and it spread like wildfire. So you might want to think twice about what is the best way to be proactive and preventative as far as health and wellness for yourself and your family.
And I'll just pick up on what Irene just spoke about regarding the clinical studies, because the typical, we already know that these clinical studies are accelerated. I mean, really accelerated, where most clinical studies take years, and I'm talking anywhere between 3 to 10 years. This study, in this particular case, is accelerated to the point where we're looking at a study that started in March or April or May and would have data within 10 months. So that's quite an accelerated path. But to the point of patients or subjects in these studies who have a reaction, it happens because you're injecting people with foreign material. It's usually a piece of the virus, or they take the entire virus and kill it, inject it into your body, and your body makes antibodies. Some people react to, what is in that formulation, and it can cause certain adverse events, is what we call them. But it depends on the severity of the adverse event. And if an adverse event is severe enough, the study may have to stop for a minute. And in this case, one of the studies had to pause because they needed to be able to evaluate what happened. And there are other situations where studies will stop if the AEs or the adverse events are too severe, and that includes death. Then they may have to stop the study. But I think that in this case, the most recent clinical trial that was paused, they were evaluating that patient. We don't know what happened to that patient. We don't know what kind of adverse event they had, usually that data will have to be disclosed, because every study that's conducted must be registered and data has to be disclosed. So at some point we should understand what happened to that one patient. And if the study continues, they'll be monitoring all the patients in that study. So I think that's just an important note.
And I agree with what both of these fine panelists have said. I would just add that even more so now is it recommended to get the flu shot. This is a vaccine that has been on the market a long time. This is not one in which is, a significant risk to any part of the population. And at a minimum, what it'll do is help differentiate a patient between flu and COVID. Now, just because you get the vaccination doesn't give you 100% immunity against the flu because there are various strands. But having a flu vaccination, should you fall ill with respiratory symptoms, will help to give us a better understanding of where you might be on the spectrum of illness with regard to COVID. If you don't have a flu vaccination, then it's fair game and you just as likely may have flu as you may have COVID, and it could delay your care or the appropriate treatment. We would hope not. But I think that now of all seasons, now is an excellent season to get your flu vaccination.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Can everybody okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I got time for one more and then I got to go bail. So if there's another question I can answer, happy to, but.
Okay, let me see if there is. Josh. Let me see. I think the other question that I was given was based on, but it's almost like more of a kind of futuristic, just some things that we can do to stay healthy. Maybe some things that you've even seen, Josh, just in your work, some things that have helped some of the patients.
Sure.
Maybe some things that we don't know about that could boost our immune systems, make ourselves healthier and stronger during this time.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you my my take, and I'll take it from the perspective of someone who's. I mean, I have not contracted it, but I'm speaking about how to keep yourself healthy if you have already contracted it. We know how to keep yourself healthy if you're not, but if you've already contracted it, number one, walk around with a mask on, away from other people, but walk around. Let your lungs work. Let your lungs expand and contract. So that is a very important thing. Hydrate. Drink fluid. Help the virus move its way through your system. Those are two things that, from an advocacy of patients who are not in the hospital, they don't need that level of care, but do need to take care of themselves while they may have tested positive. Those are two things that everyone seems to recognize as a global recommendation for helping. There are other things for patients who are in the ICU, and I'm sure they can talk about that if they want to, about proning and all these other things. But from someone who's sick but not in the hospital, hydration, mobility.
That makes sense. Hydration and mobility, just to keep moving. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Josh, for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely. Sorry you have to leave, but we understand. But thank you so much for your weigh-in.
Have a lovely evening, and thanks again. Take care.
Hey, you too. Take
Good
care.
night.
Thank you. Good night. All right, it's just us girls. Here's the ladies. We're going to pick it up from here, right? So I have questions for each of you. I've been having a really interesting time switching between my phone and my laptop and trying to find these questions. And luckily, some of them I've remembered. So it's a little bit helpful that I've been looking at the questions over and over again. But I did have a question for you, Jennifer, I guess in relation to the clinical trials and the vaccine, and I guess the fear that happens a lot, especially in the people of color, the African American community, about even being tested at this point, for as vaccines get rolled out or new vaccines. I mean, people watch the news, they look, on social media. It's a little scary out there, especially if there's this rush that's happening. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, like I said, I was compelled to write a piece recently called "The Tuskegee Experiment's Impact on African Americans' Concern Regarding the Vaccine and the COVID-19 vaccine." And I wrote that article because I felt like we were having this discussion in our communities about, I'm not taking the vaccine. I'll wait a year. I'll see what happens, et cetera, et cetera. But there was really another story under that. And a lot of it had to do with, I mean, even young people who have no real memory of Tuskegee because it didn't happen in their time. They may not have learned about it in the classroom, but maybe their grandparents talked about it, or and the Tuskegee is just one example of the mistreatment of African Americans in the US healthcare system. Actually, behind me is a book called Medical Apartheid, which kind of outlines many of the studies from the early founding of not just this country, but throughout the world, of mistreatment of African people within the African diaspora and the healthcare system. And so I think that we have to really be mindful when we talk about encouraging people to take the vaccine, or telling people we're not living in those times anymore, just kind of go, enroll yourself in a clinical trial, et cetera. We have to be mindful that there is a historical context that really shapes our understanding of what is possible when it comes to healthcare in the United States. And our treatment is sometimes very different. And Irene can probably speak to that as a nurse, and just seeing patients and the disparity in treatment for African Americans. So what I do is I encourage people to follow the data. And I tell my friends and family members, go to the WHO, World Health Organization, look at their website. They post something on COVID-19 every day. And it's not necessarily just what's happening in the United States, but it's globally. So you get a real understanding of the treatments that are available, the need to wear a mask and everything else, but you see it from the perspective outside of just the US. And I tell people to study the data. Look at the safety data coming out of the clinical trials. If that safety data concerns you, then maybe you don't want to enroll in a clinical trial. Look at the risks. What are the risks? Just follow the data. And if you don't know how to do it, ask somebody. Talk to your doctor, talk to your nurse practitioner, ask those questions, but get informed. Don't stay in this place where it's just like, I'm not taking the vaccine. I'm not doing that. Because if you don't, you're still going to need to have certain measures in place that ensure that you do not get the virus. So that's kind of how I've been approaching it with people that I know and people that approach me about it. It's complex. It's not one
Very
answer.
complex. Yeah, I agree. I think it's very complex. A lot of people, I mean, just the people that I've talked to personally, they, first thing they say is, I'm not getting the vaccine. I'm, especially if it's a person of color, but it's a lot of people that are saying that, not just people of color, just because of the fact that if the vaccines aren't taking the proper time to be tested, or tested in the lab per se, if that's not happening, and then you're rolling it out to the general public to look for, I mean, you just feel like you're a guinea pig. They're looking for people to test it, and then it's like you feel like you're putting your life on the line.
Well, that's why you have to get informed, because the risks are laid out in most clinical trials. So you know what the risks are. And if you're willing to take the risk, then yeah, enroll in a clinical trial. And the other thing that I'll say is that you're right. And it's a really important point that it's not just African Americans who are saying, I don't want to take the vaccine, I'm concerned. It's across the board. I think I saw some data that showed that almost 50% of all people, and maybe higher, are concerned about taking the vaccine. And then there's data that breaks it out by demographic group. And it shows that whites have, maybe a 36%, 36% say they would take the vaccine compared to maybe, less than that for African Americans. But I do want to say that I think we need to be careful when we say people of color are concerned about taking the vaccine. There is a particular challenge within the African American community because of the mistreatment. And I think until we start to recognize that and address it, we'll continue to kind of lump it all into,
Right.
it's an issue of people of color. And
Right.
it really
It's not.
isn't.
Yeah.
It really is a particular issue for African American people in this country because of the mistreatment and the historical mistreatment. And we have to address that.
Okay. So Jennifer, just to piggyback that, how long do you think it should take to produce, a vaccine that would be something that would be rolled out to be tested, or something that would be prepared in a clinical trial? I mean, from your experience, what have you seen, or what do you think, in your professional opinion, is the actual regular amount of time that it should take?
I can only, so my background is in neurology and neuroscience. My PhD is in pathology, not virology. So I don't make vaccines, but I do study the data. As a scientist, and Irene knows this, we study data. We look at data. And what I do know is that the flu vaccine took a long time to develop, but it's also was not a pandemic type of flu.
Right.
I mean, we had one in 1918, but for the most part, the vaccine that's created now was not a pandemic or epidemic type of disease. These are different times where we have a pandemic on our hands and we have to accelerate. The one good thing is that there's a lot of technology already developed because we were developing vaccines for flu and HIV and etc. Even though there is no vaccine for HIV, but we've been working on it. So there are platforms that have been established that can help to accelerate development. And that's the good thing. But we also have to include the human element. And when you are injecting a novel virus into people, you have to monitor that, and that takes time. The biggest issue is safety, and you have to understand that safety is not something you just monitor during the course of the vaccine. You give it over 2 weeks and you just monitor safety over 2 weeks. The safety impact is long lasting, so you have to be able to look at even up to 1 year what is happening in these patients, and so I can't tell you the answer to your question because I don't think anybody really knows. Maybe the folks at NIH know, but I think the rest of us are just kind of looking at the data.
Okay. All right. Cool. Let me see. So thanks, Jennifer, so much for that. So I'll switch over to Irene. So Irene, with the possible second wave coming, do you think hospitals are better prepared now? What are your thoughts for the time that we're in now?
Well, obviously we have a better idea of what to expect. You do your supply chain. In the beginning, we just didn't know, and we were playing it by ear. Now you can sit down and say, this is the amount of particular PPE equipment we need. These are the other type of medical equipment leading up to ventilators that we may need. These are the particular amount of beds, or maybe a whole unit or ward that we could set aside. These are the amount of particular medical personnel that we need, and to activate our, some hospitals have a hospital command emergency incident system that you can activate other people to come in if they go into internal disaster mode. because technically speaking, it's a high incidence, it's internal and external. Each hospital healthcare system has a particular system set up, and they even do drills. So, I mean, actually speaking, COVID-19 was like that perpetual living drill, if you want to call it that, for almost, what, 5-6 months. So once you finish that, you have to debrief as far as what worked well, what didn't work well. Are we expecting a second and third wave? And we are. And how can we best be able to handle that new wave of patients that may or may not come in, including our fellow coworkers? Because if your coworker gets sick, 9 out of the 10, their treatment starts at the hospital if they fall ill at work. So that's another component to think about. And then you had a helping hand, literally a tri-state area, and I believe maybe even Pennsylvania. We were helping each other out. Like, do you have this? And because we have that, and can we swap it out? You can see the wave coming from the West Coast or the East Coast or the Southwest or the Southeast. So do I think we have a better understanding of how best to use our resources this time around? Yes. Do we want to have to do it? No, but it's unfortunate. This is the reality of it all. So I tell people, be proactive in your care. Like Josh said, wash your hands, put your mask on. Keep a safe distance from people. The minimum is 6 feet. I don't think most people realize that the minimum technically is 6 feet, because I'm one of them people. Some people, when they sneeze, it's real cute. When I sneeze, it sounds like a tuba coming across. I'm sneezing out droplets, and if the wind catches it, it
That's
moves.
Yeah.
Right? So
That's real.
nice breezy day, fall day, and I put out a good it's gonna fly.
right.
So we talk like
Yeah.
27 feet. So we
Yeah.
tell people, I know you miss grandma, I know you miss your friends and all that, but be mindful. I think our second waves are coming from the small gatherings, because we figure, it's just us, how bad can it be? You're only gonna have like 5-6 people in here. And we're gonna separate, but then you start to move in. Well, let me give you a COVID hug, give you a COVID kiss. How bad can it be? We're gonna take a picture together, take your mask off. Because you see that a lot. And then, before you know it, Monica has it. And then by chance, Samantha gets it. And then next thing you know, Chanel says, I got it. Irene, I think you need to go get tested because, and I'll say I'm asymptomatic. I don't feel a thing. That's the second wave I noticed. More people are asymptomatic. They just happen to get tested and they come up positive, which means they've been walking around for how long? A carrier, possibly infecting other people. So again, it's the whole education, better utilization of all our resources, and trying to avoid that second wave of fatigue with this particular pandemic. Because we're coming into the holiday season. People are already freaking out about, like, how am I supposed to do Thanksgiving with my family? Or Christmas.
And I appreciate you bringing that up too, Irene. My mom's in a nursing home in Atlanta, which is a hot state. And, just thinking about, how do I go see her? I don't know how long she's going to be here, so, they just started opening up the nursing home so that the patients could be seen outside at socially distanced. They could see each other, because my sister, my niece, my nephew, that's what they're doing every week. So, what does that look like? I don't know how long they could do that. It stays warmer there. When Josh and I first did the Frontlines, the very first one, we both have family in Georgia, in Atlanta. So we both have that concern, about what's going on there. We'll keep our ear to the ground for what's going on there. But, just Thanksgiving and Christmas, what does that look like so different now. And how do we keep each other safe? Like, how do I go see my mom for, I don't know how long she's going to be here. And then when everything closes up, if it closes up again, I won't be able to see her. Tomorrow's not promised. So I'm thinking, okay, do
Right.
it's a lot of people say, well, we just got to keep waiting. But then, when you have somebody that's older and they're frail, and it's just
Yeah.
like, I'd hate to not be able to see her one last time, so
Yeah.
it's
It's a
a hard
lot to
thing.
contend with. It's a
Yeah,
lot to contend with. So
it is. Mm-hmm.
it's like my mom died in May.
Mm. Sorry to hear
She
that,
has
Irene.
suffered
Sorry,
thank
Irene.
you. Thank you. She suffered a long time with co-occurring disorders for almost 30 years. Multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, congestive heart failure, diabetes. Towards the end, our main concern was, if you go into the hospital, we have to advocate from afar, right? You can't
Yes,
go in. I can't come in here with you. We
yes,
can't, how are we gonna do this? So we're on the phone with the doctor and the nurse. She had a whole plethora of services. And I had the COVID, so I didn't see my mom maybe till like January or February before everything, happened. And believe it or not, the night before she died, I actually went over to her house because she was getting in and out of the bed. She was not following the doctor's orders because sometimes we take care of our parents, they're like children, right? Then I had to come over, like, you gonna make me put on a mask and all this, and come over to the house, and I'm standing in the, you stand in the doorway, and my I guess that one bright spot is that she died at home in her bed. And it was just, and her heart just, it stopped.
Mm.
Because I told her, I said, if you go into the hospital, you are frail, you have a lot of factors going on. I don't know if you'll make it. And then how are we going to visit you and things of that nature? I don't think people realize also in the long-term care facilities, since they stopped the visiting, some of the patients who were already depressed anyway, because they were in a long-term care facility, now you don't have anybody to come and visit you.
yes,
Your family can't come. Some places wouldn't even let you come up to some places would let you come to the door, right? And you could bring your mom or
yes,
dad down to the lobby. Some other places like, no, we're not doing that. So I said, the depression
Yeah.
can speed up the process of a decline and make it rapid, and then they literally die alone. So I think that particular segment of the population, how we dealing with people who have chronic long-term particular illnesses. What about our patients in the LTCs? They were kind of forgotten, almost like, well, they old, they frail, something happened to them. I mean, it is what they lived a good life. However long they have here, they still have the right to be able to get their visitors, to receive love, kindness, care, and compassion. I mean,
absolutely.
this whole pandemic has opened up a can of worms that, I guess some people didn't want to come out of the closet.
Right,
So
right,
I tell people, map out your plan accordingly. You travel some states, you got quarantine when you get there. And then when you come back here, you got quarantine again. Like, can you afford to do that?
Right.
What we doing about family
right.
time?
Yes,
And it means a
yes,
lot to the holidays, like if you're counting the years with a loved one, because they're frail, this might be the last holiday. I want us to be
absolutely.
together and I don't want to do a Zoom.
Right, right. That's right. That's right. And I
You know,
appreciate you. I'm sorry. I just want to say this, and I'll switch to you, Jennifer.
yeah.
I appreciate you, Irene, for bringing up the long-term care facilities, because I think that mindset that you just shared is exactly spot on. I mean, I think, advocacy for my mom has just changed and has been so traumatic for me and my family, because we can't physically get into a facility to see her. Nobody calls you back. It's been a horrific experience because you can't go, helping the staff to be accountable and to call. And when it just started to open up a tiny bit, which was in the past week or two, that's when we were able to see, okay, mom's feet are swollen. Is it her congestive heart failure flaring up?
Right.
So, all the calls started with the doctors and the nurses, but, up until that time, all we had were video calls and phone calls, and that was it. And that just goes to show there's so much you could do and see on a video call.
Yeah.
See the swelling of her hands, the swelling of her feet, to advocate for her. Listen, something has to be adjusted in her meds, give her a test, check her thyroid, get a LASIK in her so that, you can reduce the fluids. But until that actual live visit happened, we didn't even know about the swelling. So advocacy has so changed now. And how do you even navigate that today during COVID with your loved ones? Whether they have a disability, she has Alzheimer's, whatever they have, whatever disability they have, whatever facility, it's navigating it today is just like a whole different animal. Yeah, it's deep. It's deep. It's really deep. So I'm sorry, Jennifer, I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
No, I mean, I think you both said it all. I think the only thing I can add to that is that at some point we're going to have to start to weigh the risk and the reward. So you mentioned, your mom is getting older, etc. She's already in a facility. And there's that window of opportunity where you can actually go and see her and she can see you, and maybe not necessarily touch, but really be in each other's presence. And I think there's a reward there that may outweigh the risk, as long as you're taking the other precautions,
necessary precautions,
social distance, mask, etc. And only every family knows what that risk reward balance is. But I think that is for the short term, and we're going to have to start to figure out what that looks like with the holidays coming up and everything. And I think the other thing that was raised is the mental health issue, which I don't think we have really addressed in a serious way yet. So we have just decided that we can't go out. We can't necessarily gather in large gatherings. So Zoom is it for everything. And when you're on a Zoom call for work from 9 to 5, and then in the evenings from 6 to 9, whatever it is, catching up with the family and friends.
You are talking to me, Jennifer.
Because I'm
speaking my pain.
I'm only talking from experience. Forget the science part now, but it is painful. It is really painful. And I think that we have to start to address the mental health impact. And we really have to start to talk about that, because for every person that has Zoom, there's somebody who doesn't. And so if we are experiencing this kind of impact, what about the people who don't have the opportunity? Imagine their mental capacity. What are we doing to help those people? So I just think, there's a lot to uncover here. And the silver lining is that this is an opportunity. This is a pause for all of us, right? And that's what my girlfriend always says. This is a pause. Yes, this is a pause for all of us. And we need to figure out what we're going to do with that pause. But the other part of it is there's a real opportunity to reimagine how to engage, to reimagine healthcare, to reimagine even, this kind of engagement, virtually. There's an opportunity to reimagine that. And I think many people of color, especially African Americans, need to start thinking about that, because once this pandemic is over, and who knows if it's going to be months or years, I hope not. But once it is, how do you come out of it? And you're not going to come out of it and just go to concerts again. That's just not the way it's going to happen. So how do you start to reimagine what's possible?
Yes, I I love that, Jennifer, that you
That's
said that,
true.
because the whole mental part of it, I knew early on back in March that I was really going to struggle. And you could be the most spiritual, positive person
Right.
in the world, but this right here is a
This
lot.
right here.
This right here. So
Right.
I
Yeah.
decided back in March that I was going to keep moving. I was going to exercise. I was going to have a daily practice that would anchor me. And that's when the GoWellnessCircle.com started, the Zumba classes. I've been licensed to teach Zumba. Look, I do PR marketing for a living. I didn't expect to start a wellness platform, but I felt like it was needed because people are struggling right now. I want to be part of a solution to keep people engaged in a community, to call people, okay, maybe it can't always, I find for our seniors, people who really can't navigate all of this, people who are, there's some that are very savvy, they get it. They know they jump on
Right.
Zoom, no problem. But there's some that really are struggling with them. Maybe something different needs to be reimagined for them. Maybe it might be a call. I find that conference calls before all this video existed, it was a conference call. I'm talking prayer calls, all of that was on audio. It was not this right here. So sometimes reaching back to some of the platforms that we use that we consider to be old school now, they still work, for certain populations of people, So the mental part of this is a big deal. It's a big deal, right now. So,
Well, I would say that you would need to have another frontline about mental health in the African American community.
I could do that.
And
I can
and
set that
then
up.
and how COVID-19 has exacerbated that particular
Absolutely.
situation within our communities, because somebody says, I know for myself, I said, yes, I have been depressed. I've had a lot of losses in a short amount of time. And I'm the oldest, right? I'm supposed to be on at all times. I'm the behavioral health nurse. I'm supposed to be, sometimes I feel like I'm pouring from an empty cup, that I have to remind myself I cannot give if I don't have anything to give.
Yes.
So sometimes I really need to fall back and then remind myself, I have my faith, so let me return back to my spirituality. You need to be focused. I said I'm inward by nature, so let me do what makes me feel good while I'm sitting back. But some people don't or can't share or don't know how to share. And it's a big stigma and shame within our communities as far as seeking outside, unbiased type of help that we know, like psychotherapy or psychiatrists, things of that nature. I cannot begin to tell you, there's nothing wrong with me. Whatever happens in this house, stay in this house. That's ain't nobody business. We're not gonna have no white people in our business. And I say, yeah, but you are falling. You are falling. So I don't think you realize the extent that you're falling, that it's affecting you physically. It hinders your ability to be a good parent, to be a good worker, because you have these issues that are not being addressed. And then now we're isolated. And then there are people who are not working. When you're not working, that first wave of unemployment checks ran out. You might have got the second wave. The rent on overdue. Everything is beyond overdue. Some people are standing on the pantry line for the very first time in their whole entire life. Some people are reaching out to get food stamps they never thought in their life. And quite frankly, there's some nurses I know where certain particular floors were closed and the nurses were moved to other floors or, put on furlough. So for some people being furloughed, and they're like, I'm 40, I'm not 20, I'm 45. I'm this close to retiring. I don't have too much saved up, or the mortgage is due. It's a lot of factors. My kids are in school, gonna pay the tuition. I make maybe $100 more over, so I can't get this and that. I'm supposed to be the breadwinner. People look up to me. relapsing in the substance use disorders is big right now.
Very big.
They would come in for treatment and they would have groups. We don't have that. Some people do well, like you said. I point and click. I think I'm pretty good, right? And other people,
right. You did good.
I keep pointing and clicking, and I can't get. And then remember, access and availability. Some people have the prepaid phones, and they run on minutes.
That's right.
You only get so many minutes a month, so they can't afford that. Or some people live in what we call Wi-Fi deserts. So they don't have access to the Wi-Fi for their children to do the remote. They don't have access to the Wi-Fi to do the Zoom. Some of them don't have Wi-Fi and don't have a laptop, a desktop, or an iPad,
Exactly.
or Chromebook.
Exactly.
So you hear stories about there's a big issue. So when some people say I had to go in the park to get a signal, they're like, why you had to go in the park? Because I can pull the Wi-Fi in the park. Right. But this is October. We can make go in November. I don't know about you, but it's cold outside.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. But the narrative is so different, right? And so you turn on television and you see the commercial of the family who's all working from home, and everyone is, the kids are running around, and maybe the parents' hair is undone, but they got their pajamas on.
No, that is beyond.
And that's the narrative for some people, but there are a lot of other people who are in an apartment with 3 kids and,
no light, no electric.
Exactly. Trying to figure this thing out. And
trying to make that beans and rice or spaghetti with no sauce and butter last.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
That's
so
real.
I think we have to really be mindful that we really have to start to think bigger and think better. We are not all experiencing this pandemic the same way.
Right. And don't
and
forget
what
the
does
children.
That mean? Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, right. Children.
Yeah.
Children are also experiencing it very differently.
Oh my gosh, they are. They are. Ladies, we have a attendee that's in the attendee room, and then we have some people on Facebook. I want to open it up for some questions. I see Sylvia Williams. Hey, Sylvia. I don't know if you have any questions for us. I just promoted you, and I'm going to ask you to unmute. So you are actually on screen with us.
And Deborah, I'll be dropping off in about 5 minutes. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. So I'm just gonna, absolutely.
Another Zoom call at 7. So
another Zoom call.
Let
me tell you, I know. I know. So Sylvia, I'm gonna ask you to unmute. And if you want, you could chime in with the question. Hey, Sylvia. And I just pulled you in.
Okay, I have a few questions, but I have to say that I'm very, very happy to hear the way you're talking and the direction in which you are going. You and I have spoken about this many times. This whole issue, number one, I think nursing homes are going to change. They're going to have to, because many of them are just around to make money, not to provide good care. How do I know this? This has been my work for a number of years. Number two, we don't have enough willingness in education for African American people. We don't in a lot of this. And, people just let it fly by, and it shouldn't be. It just should not be. And there's so many of us who don't have the resources that we need. If you look in what's happening in New York City, for example, what my real concern is what is going to happen to us as African American women and men, what is going to happen to us? Because all of us are going, if we're lucky enough, we're going to be older. We're going to be needy when we get older. And who is thinking about this? I mean, it makes me very upset when I hear about people who want to get rid of the, excuse me, the Obama health care plan or anything like that. But we really have to think about what can we do? What can we do and what can we ask to have done as for those of us who are aging? And that's a big thing. It's a very big thing.
What are your thoughts on that, Irene?
Well, if you don't start advocating now,
Mhm.
it is safe to say once we get over this particular hump, people will generally migrate back to old habits. And don't revisit this particular topic until they literally either A, have to be placed in a facility, or B, have to place a family member in a facility. We don't, as a nation, not particularly subsets of race or ethnicity, we don't do well with what's called estate planning or doing your 5 rights living will for yourself and for your loved ones until something catastrophic happens.
Right.
And then it's like a patchwork quilt, right? And then you're just running off doing here and there. And quite frankly, most LTCs are not properly staffed. So the patient to nurse to patient ratio is bigger in a subacute facility, that's what they call, as opposed to an acute, like a hospital. So you might have one nurse with 40 patients. That's hard to contend with. You do have your CNA, certified nurses assistants, but at the end of the day, our oath is to do no harm. It's hard when you have to do so many patients, and management is expecting you to do this from the start to the end of your shift. And there's no reason why you should stay over to have to do extra. So that's another thing to look at. I think we need to reevaluate, like you said, Sylvia, and relook at what is a long-term care facility and how best can it be utilized? We shouldn't be warehousing people.
No.
We should be tending to their needs, you know, whether they need to stay for a couple of weeks or a couple of months to get back to a better quality of life, if not the original quality of life, right? Or
Right.
maybe somebody, this is where they're gonna stay for the remainder. Maybe there's a memory unit. Maybe they had a massive stroke, and this is the best that can be. So how can we make them comfortable with dignity, give them their pride? You know, treat them like adults. They're not children. You know, they don't wear diapers. Those are incontinent briefs, things of that nature. So how, you know, how can we incorporate the family as a whole? I think for that, we have to look outside of the United States. Other countries, they do very well with long-term care facilities. Granted, there's a different type of pay systems, but at the end of the day, those particular practices, or what we call evidence-based practices, how can you implement something like that or similar here in the United States? And then we as a people need to reach out. If I'm going to take care of mom, dad, my husband, my wife, my significant other at home, I need to have access to all of the resources I need so I can keep them home and still get them that level of care that they deserve. Navigating the pool of trying to take care of a loved one at home where you become the primary caregiver, it is very hard. And if you don't know what to do, you will literally get lost in the sauce. So I've done it for 30 years. I've also done it for my clients. Most of my clients lived in supportive transitional housing. Some of them were coming out of state psychiatric facilities, probation, parole, shelters, off the street, court order treatment. We're trying to acclimate them back into society by transitional supportive housing. In one particular nonprofit doing a housing first model. But a lot of them have co-occurring illnesses or disorders or morbidities. you know, how to get them used to, this is how you go to the doctor, this is how you go to the dentist, this is how you go get your medicine. Maybe you need a home health aide, or maybe you need a companion. This is what we need to do to get that paperwork going. I really need to jump on this doctor's neck, like, why you didn't fill this form out? Because time is of the essence. Because, you know, the faster I submit the form, the faster you can get the services. And then, how's the care going? What can we do? Can we get more services? Maybe you need managed long-term care as opposed to health homes. Maybe you need visiting nurse to come you know, it's a whole, we don't have that particular education where you could just, you know, click a link or, you know, go in the library, go in the phone book and look and say, hey, I need this. Our providers, as providers, some of us, you know, we don't know. So, and then in our communities, we kind of hesitant to letting strangers into the home.
Yes.
I
Very
don't know all
true.
these people, you know, in there with my mama. I don't know who these people are. I don't know, they're gonna rob them blind. I saw that story on TV.
Mhm.
I mean, some unfortunate things happen, right? But and I raised my white flag for help because I was working the midnight shift full time and running home to take my daughter to school. And then when I took her to school, I ran straight to the hospital and sat there until it was time for me to go to pick up my daughter from school to take her home to do her homework. Did I just say, I can't do this anymore? I look like I'm run over. I look worse than her, and she here in the hospital.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the social worker saw that, and she said, you could get a couple of hours at home. And the first thing out of my mouth was, I don't have no strangers around my mama. They don't do my mama right, something about to happen. And she said, okay. That second time I was running ragged like I was crazy, I raised the hand one more time. Anytime you ready to fill this, I would gladly, it was done like 1, 2, 3. And literally that's how we started. And then I had the good fortune of having good nurses come to the house and they would educate me on stuff. And I would go to the library. You know, back then we didn't have the internet. I had to go to the library. That's how I learned to be a good advocate. And that's how I got the impetus to go to school to be a nurse.
Wow.
So I learned a lot going along the way, and you always have to advocate. And even if you don't have family involved, you know, I tell the clients, you know, raise your hand, advocate for yourself. Don't be scared.
Yes, yes. Advocating is very important, you know, so I'm totally with you with that. And I've learned so much from watching my mother as a caregiver. And then now I became her caregiver as she declined with her dementia and Alzheimer's and a host of other issues. However, here's the thing. I know that 33% why caregivers pass away before the people that they caregive, that's real. Right. And I know it's real because when my mother started to decline, the very next year I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so it was like, it was one of those situations where I realized that I'm not going to be able to take care of her if I don't take care of myself. You know, husband and I, we're getting older. So how do we take care of ourselves? I've gone the route with the caregivers, the home, and managing all the pieces. Sylvia knows some of this story because she's my good friend from the Montclair Y. So navigated it and was willing to keep navigating it at my own detriment. Okay. But then it got to the point with the Alzheimer's and the dementia and all the other issues where you do have to work in partnership with the facility, the best facility that you can find to advocate for your loved one and to make them accountable. And it's better with a team of relatives or friends or whoever wants to help so that they don't just hear my voice or see me, but when you have that many issues, you have a loved one with that many issues, at some point you do have to put the mask on yourself because you can't help them if you're all you know, if you're torn down yourself, you know, right. you have to take care of yourself in order to take care of anyone else. And I learned that lesson from my mom as well. And I also learned it from getting breast cancer. I'm still I got 3 more years, you know, 2 years I've been cancer-free.
Right.
Just finished treatment, 2 years ago. I'm still on a 5-year plan. I got to go every year and get checked and everything. And my oncologist and my
Yes, you do.
doctors, they told me, they said, listen, you can't go down that road. You have to get the help, and you have to accept the help and know that you're not a superwoman. And sometimes I think for women, of Black women in particular, African American women, Latino women, we take on the world. We take on the world. We take care of everybody. We literally hold up the world, and
That's true. That's
that
true.
is to our own detriment. A lot of times that we will get sick. We won't go for our own mammograms and, other things that we need to do for ourselves because we're now taking care of, hubby, boyfriend, partner, children, parents. And then guess what? You lose grandparents, grandchildren. Then you lose track of your own health in that mix. So that's real.
But I think sometimes it's unfortunate. The caregiver has to hit a brick wall for they kind of like, I'm paying attention and I'm gonna sit down. Last year for me, traveling with pneumonia, with a lung collapse. Just don't worry, when I get home, I'm gonna sit in the bed, I'm gonna take a couple of ibuprofen, I'm gonna put a heating pad on my back, I'm gonna make it. I just need this one, and I was doing a panel just like this, but in person. And I said, I don't feel good, but once I finish with this, I'm gonna lay down and then I'm gonna make my way back to New York. I wasn't even in the state. And that, I guess, when my mother said, maybe God was more than trying to tell you something, maybe he had to slap you upside your head. I said, yeah, he did. Because I had my undivided attention and I was in the hospital for 7 days. And even that first couple of days, don't tell Mom that I'm here because I don't want to make her upset. That night when I went in, I had the nerve to tell them. They said, oh, who do you need to call? I said, no, I'm going home tomorrow, so there's no need to call anybody. He said, number one, you're not going anywhere. And number two, we have to call somebody. And I was so hard-headed. I said, no, I don't want to upset anybody. That my friends that went with me were reaching out to people, texting on their phone so I couldn't see it, to say, she in here, it don't look good, and we got to get.
They had to hide the phone from you, Irene.
Yeah, because I was hyper vigilant, like I'm ready to go, just, give me some oxygen, and I'm ready. I can't stay here, I got to go home. I got my daughter to take care, my mom, I got to get back to work, all that. That's that second day when my sister FaceTimed me. She immediately took the phone and gave it to my mother. She said, here's your daughter, she in the hospital. And that's when I told her. And she was like, why didn't you tell me? I said, I didn't want to make you upset. She said, well, now I am upset because you didn't tell me. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Mm-hmm. And she was like, they said, do we have your attention now? I said, you have my undivided attention. Like, like I'm good now. Right. So that was my wake-up call. Like, the world will turn without you. If you drop dead tomorrow, they will replace you with a new worker tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
If you don't own your home and you rent, they're gonna rent it out by the end of the month, right?
Yeah.
If you have a partner, significant other, they're gonna eventually get over, move on, find somebody else, right? Your children have memories, things like that, but life moves on. So I was like, we have to learn as women. It's okay to do self-care.
Oh, thank you.
Self-care.
Self-care. Like, if I don't want to do nothing but watch reruns and eat ice cream, I'm gonna do that.
Oh, thank you.
I want to get a massage. I think we should do that. Listen to music, do something, but
do something for yourself, right?
Self-care is so important. It is so something important that we don't do as a nation, and particularly women of color. So
we got to do it. We got to do it. It's critical.
It's a part of your treatment plan.
Right. Exactly. It's part of your treatment plan. So it's so critical. We got to do it. Got to do it. So, all right. So I got Sylvia on mute. Let me ask her to mute. Today's Sylvia's birthday, so we got to wish her happy birthday.
My goodness.
Can't see her, but I'm going to keep asking her to unmute for me. Okay, Miss Sylvia, where you at? I'm asking you to unmute there. She's coming. Well, while she's unmuting, I'm going to, because we've been talking. Boy, this has been awesome, Irene. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you. It's been fantastic. I'm just going to share my screen real quick because we just have, about 5-10 minutes before we're going to close out. Just to let everybody know, this is part of what we've been doing with the Gold Wellness Circle. This started literally 7 months ago. It was birthed from COVID, and it was in response to COVID. So we have some wonderful resources there, articles. We got our Zumba and yoga videos there, articles on self-care. I'm a big advocate for that, especially being a breast cancer survivor. Next Tuesday, we're having our Gold Women's Wellness event, and that's going to be all about wellness and self-care and how do you stay healthy? How do you keep that anxiety down when you're going through this pandemic? How do you do that? How do you take care of yourself? So we got our press link, and then we got, community spotlight. This was a part of my ACS journey with American Cancer Society. And when I was going through cancer, 14 months of treatment, everything from chemo to radiation, you name it, I went through that. So we got that all there. But yeah, sign up for some of our events too. If you want to take a Zumba class, you can take one. Yeah, see, I can't even hide that fire truck, right? So we got fitness classes, Zumba.
It's nothing like New York. So
I'm in New Jersey. We still got, let me tell you, if I was in New York, it'd be a lot louder.
All right, in the tri-state area, you just, you
roll with it. I know. So we got Zumba yoga tomorrow at 5:30. So join us for that. But we have a lot of good stuff. And we started our store we use for fundraisers for a lot of our charities, because two of our biggest charities that we work with has been American Cancer Society and the Food Bank of America, which are of New York. So we're trying to get some people some food, some donations and stuff like that. We know that food insecurity is a real thing right now. So this is our store now that we have, we're just trying to raise some money to help some others out. And so we're excited about the work that we've been doing at the Gold Wellness Circle and giving you programs like this. We have the experts like, Irene, and Jennifer and Josh, you guys have rocked. Just been awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for.
Wow, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Fabulous. Miss Sylvia, I don't know where you at. I've been trying to ask you to.
Well, tell her I wish her happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Sylvia. So we're gonna bow out and thank you and join us next Tuesday. We'll be back again. This same time slot for All for Women's Wellness, all about the ladies and Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So thank you so
awesome
much.
Sauce.
Yeah, this has been fantabulous. So yeah, thank you so much. So have a good night, everybody. Take care.
You too. Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.